narcissistic personality disorder. It is a stable, persistent pattern of personality functioning that is characterized by selfishness and arrogance. And there's 9 symptoms, of which a person needs 5. And I'm going to crunch these down.
What if some of the key traits that drive high performance are also the ones at the very core of narcissism? If you were in a stadium, what percentage of people are narcissistic?
16%.
And if you were to walk into the halls of a world-class football team or world-class basketball, coaches/athlete mix?
20 to 25%.
Wow. Welcome back, or welcome to the Finding Mastery podcast, where we dive into the minds of the world's greatest thinkers and doers. I am your host, Dr. Michael Gervais, by trade and training, a high-performance psychologist. Now, the idea behind these conversations is simple: to sit with the extraordinaries, to really learn about how they work from the inside out. Today's conversation is one that hits deep, and I am so pleased to welcome Dr. Ramani Introduction, clinical psychologist, professor, and leading expert on narcissism.
So when a person is in a relationship with someone who's narcissistic, the most common experiences we witness are self-blame, self-doubt, isolation, anxiety, depression. I hate to say it, but destroying a person's psyche is a pretty straightforward process.
Dr. Ramani shares her model for navigating these relationships. She explains the different types of narcissism and how gender shapes their expression.
The girls are allowed to be able to express emotion. What we still have not figured out is how to hold space for men and boys to be vulnerable without pathologizing them as weak. And without that vent, I do think that the grandiose and the malignant narcissism are more likely than to be expressed.
Dr. Ramani's insights are powerful, practical. They're grounded in years of clinical research and personal experience too. Okay, so speak to the person that's in a relationship with somebody who's narcissist. How do you help guide them? Stay or go?
So the stay or go conversation, I tend to be agnostic. I say.
So with that, let's jump right into this week's conversation with Dr. Ramani Introduction. I'm really looking forward to this conversation. I think I spend a lot of time with narcissists. And so
given what you do, yeah, you do.
Yeah,
yeah, you do.
So so there's a lot to unpack here. Mm-hmm. But let's start at the beginning. Yeah. Where does the story of narcissism begin for you?
Mm-hmm. It begins, I wish it was more sparkly, this story, more interesting, but it's actually kind of like many research stories, it becomes in a sort of a dull necessity as a mother kind of a thing. I was a brand new professor at Cal State LA and working on other people's research, and there were labs around the city. And the student research assistants would come back, and over a series of weeks, they would just come back like, really with the sort of like, rubbing the temples, headache kind of thing. I'm like, what's going on? And they kept describing these patients who pretty much monopolized the run of the clinic. They were entitled. They were rude to the receptionists. They were rude to the nurses. They were rude to the research assistants. They were demanding. They were difficult people. And that was the word that came to mind, was difficult. It was enough that these research assistants were feeling like, I don't want to do this anymore, which made me wonder, would the other health professionals want to step back? And honestly, how much of a sort of healthcare toll these people were taking? Was everyone getting poorer care because the healthcare professionals were so burned out at dealing with this small handful of difficult patients? That led me to start a program of research looking at personality and health behaviors, perceptions of health, self-protection and health, and with a real focus on these sort of rigid maladaptive personality styles like narcissism to see what would come out of it. And I looked at personality disorders, the whole 9 yards. But simultaneous to that, I also, about maybe 5 years later, my private practice was really coming up in earnest. I was doing all this research on narcissism, and I was talking to people who kind of kept telling me the same relationship story. They were being invalidated. They always wondered what they were doing wrong, saying wrong. They were being gaslighted, but we weren't even using the term as much then. And
it was a new term for me 10 years ago. Yeah, it wasn't part of my training.
No.
And I do like the term. I think it's probably overused, maybe dangerously so in some cases. But so we'll come back to gaslighting, what it is. Mm-hmm. And we also need to operationalize narcissism in a minute. But okay, sorry to interrupt, but so go right back into it. So then
in doing my clinical practice, I was like, how interesting. These people, they bought all the relationship books and all the marriage books, and they did what those books told them, chapter and verse. And they were getting nowhere. The relationship problems actually just kept getting worse and worse. But when they described their partners to me, I'm like, this is clearly someone narcissistic. The behaviors are there. So I decided to take a leap into the unknown and educate these clients about narcissism. That was the aha moment. They said, wait a minute, this thing has a name? And the minute they realized it had a name and it was a thing, they really kind of came back from the precipice of feeling crazy. And when it really was why they were stuck, why they couldn't get unstuck, why the world saw this person one way and they were having a different experience. Once we were able to reconcile all of that, people were in a much better position to make decisions. I mean, not everyone left, but even those who stayed were like, now I know what I'm dealing with. And the ones who left really left on the basis of this really isn't going to change because it's not.
Narcissists don't really change.
They don't change. And that's how, and then I realized what we do is we blame people in these relationships.
Why don't you leave?
Why don't you leave? Why don't you stay? Yeah. What is wrong with you? You're not being locked in. And the problem was, and this is what was so compelling to me, narcissism is different than addiction, or if you were to partner with bipolar disorder or schizophrenia. Those are viewed as problem states, right? Being an addict is not healthy. Living with a major mental illness is not healthy. But narcissism is different. These people were charming, charismatic, confident. They look good on paper. They were overrepresented in leadership. So to the world, these people were the proverbial catch. They were often quite charming in a crowd. They'd often pick up the check for a large group of people. So the world had a really beneficent view of these folks while their partners and family members were suffering. That dichotomy, that's what brought me into the world. I realized that we have been gaslighting these clients all along, and that's why I came into it.
So this didn't, you said sparkly, your origin story was not sparkly. So you did not have a relationship with a narcissistic parent, or I know it's not your mother, right? Because
it's not my mother, but I'll tell you this, I've had all of the above. Parent, past partners, not my ex-husband, bless his heart, he's a good man, but parent, ex-partners, friends, colleagues. I had every kind you could have.
In your life.
In my life. But here's the irony. That click together I'm doing this work. And I remember my therapist once sort of sitting in front of me in a bemused way. And I was like, what is happening with your face? It's like therapist on therapist. Therapy is a bit like chess with the devil kind of thing. Yeah. I'm like, what is this face? And she said, it was the day I was like, isn't it ironic, that I basically, ended up taking over the family business without intending to. And she started laughing. She's like, I was wondering how long this was going to take you. And she said, I'm convinced you stayed in those toxic relationships longer than you needed to just to get data.
Oh God. Okay. Let's hope not, but I get it. Okay. So let's get into, let's operationalize narcissism a bit. Let's get into what it is. And we're going to point to the relationship bit with a narcissist. So just go as high level as you want to talk about narcissism, the definition, the characteristics, and the types.
Yeah. So narcissism is a description of a personality style. And I really am making a fine point of that because I don't think that when we use the word narcissism, we're talking about a disorder, that whole idea of narcissistic personality disorder. We can put a pin in that and come back to it later. But
you're breaking form from the field when you say that. I am
breaking form from the field. And I don't think this diagnosis should have ever existed. There's no value add. There's no evidence base of treatment. It is no clinician in their right mind would write this down. Certainly it could be a guiding hypothesis, but no one's going to put this on a document that's going to track this client around. Insurance isn't going to pay.
Wait, so you're saying that clinicians don't diagnose narcissism because they don't pay and they don't change.
They don't pay, they don't change. And it's a stigma many times for the client. HIPAA being HIPAA, the fact of the matter is, if this paperwork wends its way through a system, which it may, if somebody's seeking out therapy in like an institutional system, like an HMO or something like that, it's sort of the scarlet letter of diagnosis, that and borderline personality. And I think even narcissistic personality disorder even more, because we actually do have an evidence base for treatment for borderline personality disorder.
But not narcissism.
But not narcissistic personality disorder. And there's not a single clinical trial.
Yeah. There's some research around it that is compelling and interesting, but not a clinical trial.
Not a clinical trial. Okay.
All right. So let's get into it. Let's define it.
Let's define it.
Yep.
So narcissism as a personality style is a maladaptive and rigid personality style, contrasting it to other healthier styles, that is very much antagonistic in its nature. So stuff like manipulativeness and hostility and arrogance and selfishness are a big part of the profile. Here's the point I want to make about narcissism. I'm going to list out about 5 or 6 key traits and patterns. You got to have all of them. This isn't a pick and choose. It's an all in. So you're talking about...
Wait, and okay, before you go.
Yeah.
I also want the listener to listen to the words you're using to describe these maladaptive, stable, pervasive characteristics. But then also you and I are going to come back to the spectrum of it.
Yes.
Because many of these characteristics are very facilitative for high performance.
You better believe it.
Yeah. So okay, our audience, they're badasses.
Okay.
And so they're going to listen and go, oh my God, she just described me.
Okay.
On a spectrum.
Yep.
Now, so do the actual clinical diagnosis bit so that we can hear the exact framing. But I do want people to listen to the other part of this as well.
Okay.
This more subtle characteristics.
So you want to know what the diagnosis of narcissistic personality disorder
Correct.
is, right? So it is a stable, persistent pattern of personality functioning that is characterized by patterns including selfishness and arrogance. And there's 9 symptoms of which a person needs 5. And I'm going to crunch these down. I'm not going to belabor the 9, but the high points of these 9 are things like grandiosity, as evidenced by things like arrogance and entitlement, and living in a fantasy world, fantasies of a perfect love story, fantasies of a perfect life, fantasies of a grand business plan being actualized. There is also...
Pause there. I'm going to do the shadow, the spectrum side, which is like, wait, I can do something special in this world.
Yes, I can.
I think I'm the magical one that can make this happen.
That's right.
Like, this whole thing runs through me. I am going to make something special happen.
That's right.
I'm going to change the world. Right. Yep. And it's those wild ones, the Apple commercial, the crazies, it's those wild ones that do change the world.
They do.
And it is those wild ones that change an industry or change a family narrative. And you don't have to be sick to be able to make a radical change.
No, you don't.
But
it helps.
When we talk about like, be really confident, see a bold vision, you're hitting on some of these characteristics. Keep going.
And I'm glad you said that.
Yeah.
We'll come back to that too.
Yeah.
Selfishness and egocentricity and entire self-focus with little regard for the needs and wants of other people, and the needs of the self are put ahead of the needs of all other people around them.
And this is where, for me, this is the distinguishing characteristic that makes it really toxic. That I am more important than you.
Yes.
Right.
Yes. And not only am I more important than you, your needs don't matter.
And how about this? I like to think about it this way, which is I have a hard time telling the difference between you and me. You're an extension of me, aren't you?
Of me. Yeah.
Like, look, if you're the narcissist and I'm wearing a blue sweater, and Mike, why do you wear blue sweaters? I've told you.
Right.
You don't look good in blue sweaters, but actually you don't know how I look in it. You just don't like blue sweaters.
Or your blue sweater doesn't work with my purple shirt today. That's really what it is.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah.
The next thing is empathy deficits. And here's where I'm going to do better than the DSM, the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual on this. The DSM kind of takes, I think, the lazy way out and just says it's a lack of empathy, but it's not a lack of empathy. I think that's the simple way out. It is low empathy, cognitive empathy, performative empathy, and transactional empathy. That's narcissism. And by that, I mean it's variable empathy too. That's key. Narcissistic
This is
people,
new to me.
Yeah,
open this up.
Crucial.
Yeah.
Because narcissistic
Is this your idea?
people, this is stuff I've expanded on from everybody else's.
Oh, very cool.
Especially the transactional variable. This is a transactional performative piece. Okay, because here's the thing. Narcissistic people are not devoid of empathy. They cannot be, or they would never be as successful as they are. They have to be able to read the room. And to be able to read the room, they have to be aware of the room, right? So it's in some ways, it's some of the emotional intelligence we see that drives sales, but it's something different than that. When the narcissistic person feels safe, stable, valued, and important, they're actually quite empathic. They're good. In essence, the day they get the raise, the day they get the funding, the day they get whatever it is that they want.
It's just temporary.
It's temporary. So this is how you can see how this would confuse a partner. Because on the day the good stuff comes, they wrap their arms around the partner and swing around the kitchen. Baby, let's go to Hawaii. Baby, I'm so lucky to have you. My God, the house looks amazing. You look amazing. That reads as empathy. It's not. It's a bit of a grandiose fairy tale for a minute, but it feels like a person's being seen or heard. And the wife might even say, oh, I'm so happy. Gosh, I had a tough day at work. You did, baby. Tell me about your tough day at work. But if she said the same exact thing the next day when there was a glitch in the funding, she would hear, are you kidding me? Are you kidding me that I need to hear about your problems? You like this house? Well, that's coming because we get all this money. I do not care what's happening at your little volunteer job. So that could happen in one day, because if the narcissistic person is well supplied, then they look empathic, but they also have the capacity to understand how someone feels. So I always say it's classically what I say, call it crying at the movie. They can watch a movie and they're crying at a scene that's evocative or sad, right? They're not cold. They're not psychopathically cut off from that scene. They're crying. It's a sad scene. It might even be that the dog comes home to its owner. So they get emotion, right? And they'll even say, I understand why that would be hard for you, but it's not that emotional kind of hug around a person or doing what they need. It's a very intellectualized experience. Narcissistic people also are very socially perceptive. That also falls into this empathy world because they're able to read what people need, and they know empathy reads well to the world. So in public, they will be quite performatively empathic, like, oh my gosh, like you see what a hard time they're going through. And it'll all seem like, ooh, isn't that also so many feels there? And it's transactional. They'll show empathy and say, okay, we talked about your feelings. Aren't we good? Now let's flip the script. So I've done my little empathy currency for the day. That's the picture of empathy. And because it's not an absence of it, a lot of people will say, well, they actually did ask me how I felt and they did listen to the answer. Doesn't that qualify?
That's why you're separating lack of empathy
Correct.
with low empathy,
Yes.
performative empathy, transactional empathy, manipulative empathy. So empathy is the ability to experience another person's state.
And to be aware of how your behaviors impact another person, and to be able to create a mental model of what someone else is going through in real time.
Yeah. And then just to be clear, compassion would be taking action from that state. So I've always thought that narcissists were manipulative in the way that they used an empathetic bonding moment, but they didn't actually feel it.
They don't feel it, but they get it.
So we're saying they get it. So it is manipulative. Okay. I just want to make sure I was getting the right thing. So it's not, but you're saying it's not lack of.
Yeah, they have the cognitive empathy. They've got it. That's empathy.
Oh, I see what you're doing. Yeah, you're right.
A lack of empathy is what we see in someone psychopathic.
Yeah, they don't feel pain.
Nothing.
They don't
There's
understand
nothing.
it.
There's
It's
no
cold.
feeling of anything.
Yeah, okay.
Right.
Finding Mastery is brought to you by Mac Weldon. If you've been a community member here at Finding Mastery for a while, you know our position on confidence. It's built from the inside out. It's not about flash. It's about really knowing who you are and showing up with clarity and conviction, a sense of purpose with substance. And that's why I'm so excited about what Mac Weldon is doing. They make clothes for men who live that same philosophy. It's understated. It's sharp. It's grounded in quality pieces that do not scream for attention. More like they quietly say, I've got this. Right now, I'm wearing their Latitude bomber. It's clean, it's simple, travels really well. And whether I'm heading to work with an organization or just grabbing dinner, it's great. And their silver and denim jeans, it's an elevated fit, it's got great fabric, and somehow they feel broken in from day one. They did a really nice job with them. And what stands out most to me is their mindset. Mac Weldon believes, quote, knowing is more important than showing. And that really resonates here with what we're doing at Finding Mastery, working from the inside out. And if that aligns with how you want to move through the world, I'd encourage you to go check them out. Head to macweldon.com and use the code FINDINGMASTERY for 20% off your first order of $100 or more. Again, Use the code Finding Mastery at macweldon.com for 20% off your first order of $100 or more. So how would somebody that is, when they read your work, they want to be a good person, they want to be their very best, they've been told by their parents, be special, you are amazing, be confident, dream big. They're told by their supervisors, like, keep going, you're amazing, you can do something, like this whole thing is going to ride or die on your success, like you've got it, you're the one. And they're listening and they go, oh, hold on. I don't know if I really have empathy. I kind of feel things, but I'm not sure. I'm kind of muted. How would you help somebody distinguish between those two?
Let me give you an example. Let's think of it as a person's being told you can do the special things and you've got the special skill set, go, do, be, succeed, okay? And the person says, I really want to do this. And this is going to be 12-hour days, 7 days a week for the next 2 years. And it would be really unkind to get into a relationship with someone because I'm not going to have the time for them. And I really want to give all of myself to this. So this isn't the right time to get into a relationship with someone because that's not cool. That's empathy.
Wow.
The person who still goes ahead and gets into the relationship because they want to have sex or they have status or whatever. And then they're mad at the person because they promised them falsely, like, we're in a relationship, but they're never around, or how dare you interrupt my work, or my work is more important to you, or they just have contempt for that person because they are an object. That's that lack of empathy. But your specialness model holds, right?
Yeah,
the special person is like, yeah, this thing matters. This thing I'm doing matters to me. And I also don't want to hurt someone. And it's not fair for me to drag someone into this right now.
So let me pull on this one more time. The grandiosity, the specialness, low on empathy, but wants it all.
Yeah.
I want it all.
Meaning the relationship too.
I want a relationship. I can do it all.
Okay, well then.
And so it's not a lack of empathy. There's a low empathetic piece, low piece to it. But I think I can do this. I really do think I can do the 7 days at 80 hours a week and be a great parent.
That's a lack of self-awareness.
Yes.
That's a lack of self-awareness. And lack of self-awareness, I still file that half in the empathy drawer and half in this drawer called mentalization. So it's the inability to understand that your 80 hours, your whole fantasy thing, it's just not going to, you're not even stopping to think about how you being out of the house 80 hours a week could affect another person.
This is most 24-year-olds.
And
I'm not saying most, but like,
it is. I agree with you.
Yeah.
And the frontal lobes don't fully develop till 25.
Yeah. And I think about the very special talent in elite sport at the age of 19.
That's right.
Or the age of 14 where adults start to think of them differently. So that's the thing that we don't talk about in elite sport is they're usually special at a young age.
They are.
And at say 14, let's just say, where teachers, adults, uncles, cousins, people that are much older than them start to treat them differently.
Yes, they do.
They treat them like they bend at their knee almost.
Yes, they do.
And it's a very contorting psychological process to become an elite athlete when you've got your whole community propping you and being in a position of deference to you.
Let me push back on that though, because I've worked with more than a few elite athletes in my practice over the years. Some narcissistic, some not. Okay. The dividing line.
It's funny that you just said some. It's not like all or nothing.
No.
Right.
Some were like, woo.
Yeah.
And some really peaked. I mean, world-class peaked as young people. And then there was the remaining 70, 80 years are going to have to live after that, right? The ones who turned into very empathic, compassionate, attuned, connected adults, they had this core empathy was there all along. And they had all the things you're talking about. The adults were in bended knee and all of that.
It was just muted.
It was muted. But not even that muted. They just had to, and in some cases what they said, and this is where it gets really interesting and quite complicated. They said that there was no margin for error. I had to sink the shot. I had to win the medal. I had to win the prize because I was pretty convinced this parent would stop loving me. That's survival.
I hear that a lot.
That's survival.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Because in a 12-year-old or 15-year-old, there's still a little kid brain in there.
Yeah. Many of us, especially them, adopt this, I don't know, adult strategy with a brain of a 14-year-old, 16-year-old, which is amazing at one level, but then really problematic when they're older. Okay, so hold on, we're down a fun rabbit hole.
I want to ask you a question though. I want to pivot to you. I'm really curious about this.
And I want to make sure we get to the 5.
I want to get to the 5, but okay. I want to ask you this before I forget. How much do you think, though, in an elite athlete, this capacity to train like an adult and yet still be expected to have academic responsibilities, but like that single-minded focus that would be required, whether it's in kids who go on to professional athletics or world championships or Olympics or all of that, how much of it do you think is dissociative?
Never been asked that question. I've never had the thought.
It's my biggest concern, having worked with this population, that some of this felt like the dissociation we see in complex trauma. An absolute dissociation where they are so in this other zone because to feel what has become a transaction with their parent is so painful that to go fully into this other space that happened to be spun into this performance. But at the end of the day, it was dissociation.
You know, the idea that they put on a new personality.
Not a new personality. I'm talking about lower, not the fully fragmented identity dissociation, but I'm saying lower on the spectrum of dissociation. Not quite us, kind of like someone saying, you there kind of thing, but the ability to, again, we know that people who are workaholics, that is very clearly a form of dissociation, right? That you could go all into something that is relatively unemotional, and that does become an offset to earlier traumatic injury.
So dissociative identity disorder is not what you're talking about.
I'm not talking about that.
You are talking about like a trauma response.
Yeah, I'm talking about trauma response, exactly.
With something that was happening, not being seen, not being valued, or some sort of trauma. And oftentimes we will hear people say, "You kidding? The court was my only safe place."
Yes,
that's why I got so good. And I wouldn't necessarily go to dissociation or dissociative experience, but I would say a trauma response, yes.
Okay.
And then I would say this is going to be a little bit of a horseshoe number. Let's say better than 80%. And I think I'm being generous. That come from some of the professional leagues in the United States. The athletes come from very difficult environments.
I know.
Call it maybe trauma-producing environments.
Adverse childhood environments.
And so
IACEs.
And then you blend that with, this is a way I'm seen. So there's there's a confluence of two variables that take place. One is it's a great escape.
Yes.
It is an escape from a trauma experience or traumatic home. And it's also provides a great place to be seen. So it's the snake that eats its tail type of experience. I don't think it raises to the level writ large for dissociation, but it is a radical coping mechanism. And I am on record saying that if you knew what I knew about the path to high performance, you would not challenge and push your kids. You would support them.
Correct.
Right?
That's right.
You would see them and you would be part of, their experience, but you would not be pushing them in this kind of wild way because the washout is radical. There's this thing called identity foreclosure.
Interesting.
And at a young age, I'm trying to figure out, am I rock and roll? Am I jazz? Am I country? Like who am I? And if you foreclose too early on just one genre of music, one way of thinking about yourself, you foreclose on all the other potentialities.
Yes.
And why would we do that? Because of all of the benefits that the person is making at an uninformed young age. So I like the conversation about dissociative. I'm going to need to run that through my Tumblr a little bit more because you are absolutely correct that trauma is part of the ecosystem for many, not all.
Not all. No, I agree.
Yeah. And just because you have trauma doesn't mean that it's a dissociative component.
No, but there's fragmentation in trauma. I mean, the two go hand in hand, right?
Yes, open that up for someone that doesn't.
Basically, that the true self that is a core element of the human experience. There's a true us with the preferences, values, beliefs, ways we go through the world, and spiritually, cognitively, emotionally. That true self exists, right? And in the best telling of the story, as a person goes through the development of self, childhood into adolescence, in adulthood, the true self gets to emerge, right? Good luck doing that in 2025 and actually at any point in human history. Because what ends up happening is, now we can have what I'd call not quite full-on fragmentation, but definitely fault lines enough that could definitely push the snap, which is even a parent who's like, oh, come on, kid, your old man's an accountant, so why don't you be an accountant kind of thing. But there's not the sense that if you became something else, you were going to be rejected. Right? The parent who wants the kid to play football and, is putting the games on him and he's 3 years old, gets him the whole thing, the pads and the helmet and the football. And then around the age of 14, the kid is much more interested in playing the trombone in the band and doesn't want to play football, knows that the parent's being disappointed, but everyone gets over it. We'll see some slight fragmentation there. But when there is trauma, when there's true disruptions of safety for a child, the true self cannot emerge. It's too dangerous. The child modifications have to happen to create safety. And that will come out through trauma responses, whether that's fight, flight, freeze, fawn, any of those kinds of responses may come up. But the child is now pulled off the track of the true self. Now the self is a survival self that modifies so they can attach. It's not even about love. It's about attachment. Attachment is survival. The fragmentation of the self is part of what happens as part of that trauma exposure.
And another way we think about it is kids that come through disruptive families, let's just say, not necessarily traumatic, but they oftentimes will adopt a persona. The angel, the high performer, the clown, the disruptor, the one that's getting in all the trouble, the rebel. Like it's not their true self. It's something that is working for them.
It's working for them, right?
But
these adaptations ultimately either work or the child collapses.
Yeah, cool.
And that's a child. It's like a submit response, basically.
Why do you think? Boy, we got to go back to the original narrative here. But why do you think 87% or more of people in the professional rankings in elite sport in the US at least, when they retire, are broke, are kind of a mess in the retirement phase? Why do you think that is?
I have a few hypotheses about that. To me, it's what I call the one trick pony hypothesis, right? It's imagine you go to school and the only thing you learned was math, right? And that's it from day one. There's no reading, there's no writing, there's just math. And so by the time you're in high school, you're actually doing relatively high level math, but you can't write a sentence. You don't know what the capital of anything is. You couldn't even, pick out Australia on a map, but my gosh, you can do math. Okay. And so if there is no math job, if whatever the world uses math differently, AI comes and comes for math, then what do? You can't, I think it's part of it is the one trick pony of it all. But I think at a deeper level, it's the identity gets fully immersed in the activity. Identity and activity are not the same thing. They're separate things. A human being engages in activity, but we are not the activity. But for a person who takes on elite athletics, they are the quarterback. They are
This is why I say the most dangerous phrase, for athletes is I'm an athlete.
I'm an athlete. Exactly.
It's the most dangerous thing that they can do. So parents that, when you introduce your son or daughter or whomever, like, this is Johnny, he's a quarterback. This is Johnny, he's an athlete. No.
This is just Johnny.
Yeah, this is Johnny.
And then let Johnny, talk about being Johnny. Yeah, and so there's so much in that identity and that the existence as an athlete, because it starts so young for children, it does shape identity. It's not like if I went to go become a ceramicist tomorrow, I'm never going to, at any point in my life, for the rest of my life, call myself a ceramicist. My identity is fully baked, cooked, and on the shelf. Yeah. So anything I take on now will not shape identity. Identity had to come from that because it came during the social developmental arc where personality and sense of self were developed.
While we're on identity, what does your identity rest on?
My personal identity rest on? My personal identity, I would say it rests on experience, culture, the roles I take. I'm a mother, so I didn't have that role, 25 years ago. So the roles I hold in the world. And without a better way of saying this, there's an inherent Ramani-ness to me. And many of the things I experience as an almost 60-year-old woman now were exactly the same things I experienced as a 5-year-old child. The 5-year-old actually in some ways got it all along, but so many societal forces conspire to almost again, that's the fragmentation, to take that away. That's not really what you want. And so I certainly made choices in my life that weren't congruent with the true self that was already emerging at the age of 5.
Yeah, it's a beautiful proposition, which is the true self is there.
It's there, always there. It's always there.
One of our first principles here at Finding Mastery is that everything you need is already inside you.
Yes.
Meaning that all of the raw materials there. And part of our job is, like kind of chiseling away at David, like it's already in there. We just got to see what the potentiality is and help support and challenge people towards that aim. But it's already in there. It's not some version of you later.
No.
It's like if you think, I do like the version model in this respect, like let's say you're on version 8 of yourself. It's like, but version 10 is like the absolute you. It's not something you need to build towards. It's get closer to home.
Correct. And I think that as societal expectations start to fall by the wayside, this is why with age, you sometimes see people landing in this more authentic, true self space because the societal pressures have been lifted. There's no white picket fence pressure. There's no go become a parent. There's no get married. That's it. The gloves are off. It's done. And so now what's left is really, who are you? You went through all the hurdles. What's left?
There are still old fools.
There are still old fools, right. And they're often the narcissists. So there you go.
Okay, good. Finding Mastery is brought to you by Felix Gray. And one of the biggest challenges we face today is our sheer amount of screen time. It messes with our sleep, our clarity, even our mood. And that's why I've been using Felix Gray glasses. What I appreciate most about Felix Gray is that they're not just another wellness product. They're rooted in real science. Developed alongside leading researchers and ophthalmologists, they've demonstrated that these types of glasses, they boost melatonin. They help you fall asleep faster and hit just a little bit deeper in the stages of rest. And when I'm on the road, bouncing between time zones, slipping on my Felix Grays in the evening, it's this simple way to cue my body to wind down. And when I'm locked into deep work, they help me stay focused for longer without this digital fatigue that starts to creep in. Plus, I think they look great. If you're ready to feel the difference for yourself, Felix Gray is offering all Finding Mastery listeners 20% off. So just head to felixgray.com and use the code FindingMastery20 at checkout. Again, that's spelled Felix, FelixGray.com, and use the code FindingMastery20 at felixgray.com for 20% off. Back home
Back
here.
on the topic.
Okay, so hit the first 2. Let's go to all 5 characteristics.
Okay, so the next one is...
Wait, start with the first 2, just to kind of come back.
So the first 2 is the first was the low empathy. The second was the pathological selfishness. The third is what I call sort of the grandiosity circumplex. And what I mean by that is sitting in grandiosity is the stuff like entitlement. I am special and extraordinary. The rules do not apply to me, but the hypocrisy is the rules definitely apply to you. So it's the fantasy. It's the fantasy of the perfect love story, the perfect home, the perfect job, the perfect life, right? And social media took that and put a megaphone on that. Because once upon a time, we didn't know what anyone's life looks like. Now we have this manufactured version of everyone's life we can peer into. But it's that all that grandiosity stuff comes together, and entitlement, arrogance, all of that are manifestations of that grandiosity. Now, in some cases, the grandiosity looks almost delusional, but it's a key defining element of narcissism.
So let's go to the origin story a little bit. I mean, I know you're moving away from NPD as a disorder. There is a spectrum that you would say is fair, right? So there's some people that are low on the spectrum. They have some of these characteristics, and some have a lot. I think the number is somewhere between like 2 and 6%. In the US
have NPD.
NPD. If you open the spectrum up where it's problematic, 12%. And if you were to walk into the halls of a world-class football team or world-class basketball, what would you think is the coaches / athlete mix?
20 to 25%.
And if you were in a stadium, so you're not in the locker room, but you're in a stadium, what percentage of people are narcissists in the stadium?
With the fans?
Yeah, the fandom.
15%, 15 to 16%.
Okay. And if you're walking outside of the US anywhere, do these numbers change?
That's the great question. And even some of them are spitballs, like the stadium. The athletic one,
I know we're guessing a little bit.
Yeah.
Oh, you're confident that the 25?
I am confident. I could even be higher.
I thought you were being conservative.
I am being conservative. It could be as high as 30%.
Yeah.
I would say that around the world, the numbers, that 12% number of enough narcissism to be noticeable, I would not be surprised if that number held globally. I do think that there may be cultures out there where cooperation and collaboration are valued, where emotional expression is not as pathologized. Maybe it's lower. I just can't. I've got to be frank with you. I'm not sure what that culture would be, because I think pretty much all cultures that have any form of capitalistic vein running through them, the hierarchical build of that culture is just, it's pretty much, that's going to allow narcissism to, it's going to make it an incentivized quality.
Yeah, it's pro-social in a capitalistic society. It's like, be ambitious, get after it, go for it. And to do that, you got to feel like you're special. You got to feel, it's pro-social in sport and high-performing environments to have some of these characteristics. And we know, I think it was 2015 at a university at Bangor, is that people that fell on the spectrum of narcissistic characteristics, that facilitated higher performance.
100%. I completely see that. I mean, there's no two way. Why wouldn't it?
Okay, so speak to the parent that wants to do the best for their child. What can parents do to support children that don't fall on this spectrum, but really are great citizens and great performers?
Basically, you're saying, like, I've got a kid who's a great performer. Let's use your athletics example to start with here. Kid who's got all the raw material to be the great athlete.
They're doing nice, and they really well.
They like what they're doing, and they're a good kid. Okay, they play nice. They're collaborative with their peers and all of that. I would say you want to attune to that child. You want to model empathy for that child. You want to give your child room to breathe. And what I mean by that is the parent who's too overzealously going in there and attempting to do the debrief with the kid as though it's some sort of post-game color coverage.
On the car ride home from practice.
Exactly. Be present with all the other stuff. Don't do that identity foreclosure. Continue. You can't just grow apples in this orchard. You've got to grow about 20 other species of stuff if you're going to keep this farm stand going. You got to do the same with your kid. Have them talk to you about, like, how, don't let it be about something else. Listen, I had kids who weren't athletes. I had kids who were performed on stage in musicals and stuff like that. The temptation I'd have to fight, and I didn't always succeed at it. Instead of asking about rehearsal or how's it coming with the show, is like, so tell me things. Like, how's it? In language I grew up speaking, what my parents spoke to me, I should say, it was the direct translation would be, tell me something. And so that, tell me things.
What is your native tongue?
Telugu. So it's a Southern Indian language. But that was, I just saw my parents this weekend. It's tell me things.
How do you say that?
Chepu.
Chapu?
Chepu.
Means tell me things.
Tell me things.
And then, so that, what I like about that open-ended is like, it right away, my son would be like, well, what do you want me to say?
Yeah.
But he can't say, how was school? Fine.
Yeah.
He can't give the one word. Tell me things.
Like what?
You know what my wife says? So she's Cuban. She says, any news about any news?
I like that.
Yeah. And so it's like an all-encompassing, Okay. So let's go back to the car ride home. What would you ask? What would you guide our parent community to ask or do right after practice?
Open-ended, if you, whatever the version of tell me things that would work with your kid, nothing at all. Want to hear about my day? Can I tell you a little bit about something I saw today? And don't make it about like that boss. Say, the strangest thing happened to me today. I saw SpaceX launch and it looked like a giant jellyfish across the sky, or I saw a tree fall across the street. And your kid might be looking at you quizzically, but there's a magic to this, which is you're not just that, right? So now a conversation could come of this, or my kids, when they were a little younger, but they were still performing, we did the whole high-low thing. Like, what's the best thing that happened today? What's the worst thing that happened today? You want to hear mine?
Yeah.
So you're also trying to facilitate that reciprocity. Like, want to hear what the good thing happened, my bad thing that happened. And so you're trying to engage them on something more than not the sports team, who's going to be starting on Saturday. What did coach say about that? That thing we were practicing last week, is that working? So, because this is now the parent getting ego gratification from the child's performance. And that's really where it falls
actually
apart.
quelling anxiety.
Correct.
That is my child going to make it?
Correct. Is my child going to make it?
I think it's more of an anxious thing. Yeah. Okay,
it could be both. It could be both.
Of course it can be both. Yeah, of course. I you know what I like is, like, I pick my son up and I'm reading his energy. Energy is like, what does that really mean? It's like, I'm just catching a vibe for how he's walking into the car. And I feel like it's weird if I don't say anything. So I say, how was practice? I don't watch practice. How was practice? And if he goes, fine, Dad. I go, I got the message. If he goes, it was really good. I did that, And I'm like, oh, there's a thing here. And then if he does, like, it was okay, and it's kind of like in the middle, and he doesn't want to have a hard conversation or whatever, I'll do one more click and I'll say, what'd your coaches have to say to you about? And I will ask that question. I heard it in your narrative just earlier, and I'll ask that as one more thing to see if he wants to explore.
Okay.
And then he'll say something like, if he goes there or not. If he doesn't, I'll say, how was school? It's my first catch up with him. It's always, I get to school, but it's like, if you the kid's walking out of school and I'm talking about something else, it's weird.
Yes.
So it feels like I'm greeting him.
You're greeting
with what
him.
he just did.
Yes. But that's why something even more open-ended is, it's almost like, tell me something. Tell me things,
Say it again in your native tongue.
Chapu. And so it's like, like an older family member will sit down and say, Chapu. And then it's just, I know what they want. They want to hear, it's almost like they don't care. I could talk about my kids. I could talk about my car. I could talk about my job. It's sort of, what do you got?
Okay. So now let's say you're in a relationship with a narcissist. Okay. How do you know if you're in a relationship with a narcissist, or, I'm going to be provocative here, you're just kind of a mess yourself?
Okay, so you raise an interesting question, right? I think that in people who are in narcissistic relationships will experience an interesting dichotomy. They will say, you know what's interesting? I love my job. I feel really competent at work. I had such a good time with my friends last Saturday at that girls' dinner we had or whatever. But when I'm at home, I feel incompetent. I feel crazy. I feel like I am greedy or selfish or stupid. So they'll say I do see this at many survivors, is there's competence in other areas of their life. Like, I have friends. I like my work. I volunteer at my kid's school, but I get home to my spouse, and it is the one place where I literally feel like I've lost the plot. And so when a person's in a narcissistic relationship and they do have other supports, what we'll see is that relationship is a place where a person feels a lot of psychological incompetence and even hurt, sadness, invalidation. People will say they lose their confidence as a result of the relationship. They think they're to blame for all the problems in the relationship. And for me as a therapist, the ringer for me is when a client comes in and especially in the first 3 to 5 sessions, for people who are in narcissistic relationships where I can see their healthy self, they will spend a lot of time in there saying, I'm so confused about what I'm doing wrong. Like I feel like all I do is say the wrong thing. He's always mad at me. Or he's cheating on me, and I feel like I can't talk about it. There's a lot of what am I doing wrong? When the person comes in and they're just loading and reloading on, my partner is a narcissist, my partner is a piece of this, my blah, 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 and all they're doing is can you believe how bad my partner is? Can you believe the terrible thing they did? Can you believe? When the entire focus is on the terribleness of the partner, I have to go digging a little deeper, because
see if the analysis is
they're not
accurate.
willing,
Yeah.
because most people who are really going through narcissistic relationships, it tends to get turned inward. What's wrong with me?
Well, so because the response is, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, this is my fault. I'm to blame. Maybe I'm saying it wrong.
Yeah.
Maybe this is my fault. Maybe they are wrong. Maybe I am this selfish. Because this is what narcissistic people do. They always are turning it around. You're so selfish. Why are you so needy? You always ask for so much. So if the other person in the relationship is expressing a need, a narcissistic partner will accuse that other partner of being demanding, in essence. And if that's something that someone's heard before in their life from a narcissistic parent or even someplace else, it really can stick and hold true. Like you might say, oh my gosh, I am selfish.
I'd love for you to speak to two people. One, start wherever you want, of course, but like one is the partner.
Mm-hmm.
Like, let's speak right into the partner that has they saw themselves in this conversation. They're like, oh my God, my partner, I think is like, it is really confusing at home. And I'm kind of overwhelmed. I'm a little scared. Like, I don't feel good about myself, but in other places, I feel like I'm pretty good. It's just like, ooh, I'm walking on some eggshells and da-da. Okay. So that person, and then maybe you can also speak to somebody who is like, if I'm thinking about the spectrum, not the NPD. We know that they don't really change because they lack insight. But even anywhere on the like NPD doesn't make it more or less severe. It's that most narcissistic people don't have a lot of self-reflection and insight. So slide way down the spectrum to somebody who sees some of the characteristics that you're describing. They are high performers and they're like, whoa, wait, I hear my wife in this. I hear my husband in this. Like, I don't want to be that person, but I do think I have some of these traits or patterns. Can you speak to both? These are the ones that I have hope for.
Yeah. So again, when you talk about the spectrum of narcissism, think of it this way. And those remaining 5 traits, by the way, are on top of the 3 I've already shared. The fourth one is an excessive need for praise, admiration, and validation. Okay. And the last one is impulsivity, dysregulation, and poorly managed emotions, especially at times of frustration.
For harmony, list all 5 one more time.
So it's the low empathy, the transactional, all the sort of, let's call it the twisted empathy. Okay.
I like that.
Pathological selfishness, the excessive need for admiration and validation, the whole grandiosity circumplex, and the impulsivity and poorly regulated emotion, especially anger, when basically they don't get their way.
Yeah, right.
Okay. Those are the 5. You got to have all 5 every time, whether it's mild or severe. Okay.
So that's a really important defining characteristic, is that if you only have 3 of them.
No, I'm not talking about narcissism with you.
So that's interesting, because I put, like, if you've got 3 of them, I put that on the spectrum, but you're saying no.
Not so much, because listen, here's the thing. All these 5 things are highly intercorrelated. It's very hard to get 3 without the 5.
You're changing my model a little bit, which I like, because I've always done full NPD, spectrum of NPD, or spectrum. And if you've got, all 5, I always put as NPD. But if you got 3 of these,
no,
you're saying no.
No, I'm not. I'm saying no, absolutely no. NPD, it's a 5 out of 9. It's the stuff I'm talking about, right? But in order for something to be defined as a personality disorder, you've got the sort of the added piece that a licensed clinician has to look at.
But this is what I'm doing.
Right?
Okay, wait, but I'm saying, if you don't have all 5, you're not NPD. You're not a disorder. If you had 3 of those with a couple of the other lower characteristics ones,
right,
I think you're on the spectrum.
But here's the thing with NPD: those 9 things, they boil down to these 5. You see what I'm saying? There's an essence. So
you don't see a spectrum then?
I do see a spectrum, and so the spectrum is mild to severe narcissism.
Narcissism, correct.
Right, okay.
So you don't have all 5, or you say you do have all 5.
All 5 always comes every time. So if you've got a person who is selfish, entitled, and needs to be the center of attention, but they don't have that reactivity and anger or passive aggression, silent treatment when they're frustrated, and they don't have the it'd be hard to have this without, but they tend to have relatively intact empathy. Here's where we start. This is where we start getting into areas of privilege. Privilege can really muddy the waters. And what I always say, that there's some people out there with so much money, their feet never touch the ground. right? They go from a car and someone opens the car door and they go into an impeccably clean house and the snack they want is waiting for them, which they don't have to clean up after. They don't do all this judgy messy life stuff.
Siddhartha.
They don't. Right. And yes, it's Siddhartha. Exactly. Yeah. They don't wait in line at Trader Joe's. They're not worrying about childcare arrangements. They don't sit in traffic. They do not wait in airport lines. None of this is their stuff. Their feet don't touch the ground. Folks like that are 100% used to the world running on their schedule and to their whims. They want to go to the Hamptons this weekend, then within an hour, someone's going to make sure they go to the Hamptons. When they get there, the precise strawberries they want are going to be waiting for them, and they love to hold court and tell stories, okay? 3 out of 5.
Yep.
I don't call that person a narcissist. I call that person maybe a little spoiled, maybe a little lucky. Maybe they were born to money. Maybe they made their money young. They're out of touch, but there's still an awareness they may have. They would not be cruel to a person who's a domestic worker in the home.
Got it.
Do you see the difference?
I do.
You got to have all 5.
Got it. Okay.
And I think when we get off of all 5, we miss the essence of why this thing has to hang together and why so many people are overusing the word. Because that privileged person, they're not narcissistic. You know people like that. I know people like
100%.
that.
Yeah.
You know, and I'm like, I think to myself, like, you know, I don't know that they get my life, but if I explain my life, they might say, that's really difficult, like, and mean it, you know, and they're saying, is there a way I could support in some way? Like, even though they're so far away from it, they care about me. And so, and I sense that as a caring. It's not contemptuous. It's not dismissive, nor is it cognitive. They just aren't in it.
So what if you have 4 and you regulate your emotions pretty well?
If you have 4 and you regulate your emotions pretty well, I would say,
I love this conversation. I know we're not even to the relationship bit, because this is what I see in elite performing environments. They have to regulate their emotions pretty well. They can be intolerant to the standard to other people, but it's facilitating growth.
Let me ask you this. Do you think they're doing it in their close personal relationships, at home, with the partner, with the kids?
Yeah, I do.
You do. So you think
I think they manage their emotions there pretty well.
In those spaces, when they're frustrated, when they're disappointed, when the deal doesn't go through.
Of course, I'm talking about some. Yes. Yeah.
Right. So the dysregulation when things don't come the way they want them to.
Because they're not seen. They're not validated.
Right.
They're not
validated. They didn't get their way. They're somebody thwarted their plan, whatever it may be. And to remain regulated in the face of that,
you're saying not narcissist.
I don't think so. No. No. Mm-mm.
That probably gives hope to a lot of people, actually. The ones listening to this conversation are like, is it me? Is it me? And
if you're regulating your emotion, because
I'm actually pretty chill.
The emotional regulation piece is so unsettling
to
for
the
partners and family members, because this person who's coming in, that hypervigilance, that eggshell walking, as it were, it's like carrying a live grenade for everyone in the family. Are they going to come home and blow up? What's going to set them off? Now, the key becomes, and sometimes this hypothesis doesn't get tested for a really long time, is there a period of time that things are going so well for this person for such a 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, their ideas keep launching, they have plenty of money in the bank, they're getting award after award, everyone's applauding them, you're the best, you're a genius, you're a this, and the things that go wrong are the little glitches along the way, but by and large, everything is on that forward trajectory. That is a very fortunate and well-supplied person. They may be less likely, but the argument would be in narcissism then, that just moves the goalpost, because now anything is going to set them off. What do you mean my jet's not ready to go at 12:05 and it's going to be 12:08 instead? You could see that. But I think that dysregulation piece is a pretty classical part of narcissism.
Cool. Yeah, very cool. Okay, so let's go into the partner stuff. Can you speak to somebody that is, let's go to the partner, not to the what I was saying, the hopeful narcissist spectrum person, not yet. Let's go to the partner. We know that they don't change because of insight. We know that if you bring them into therapy, they tend to, if the therapist is not tuned, woo the therapist.
Yes.
And all of a sudden now, let's use the bonus word, like the client feels gaslit even more. But there's a thing that's happening where now it's set back the person's sense of agency and strength because their clinician is, or their therapist is aligning with the narcissist. Okay. So speak hope and applied practice to the person that's in a relationship with somebody who's narcissist.
So when a person is in a relationship with someone who's narcissistic, the most common reactions and experiences we witness are self-blame, self-doubt, isolation, loneliness, rumination, regret, anxiety, depression, anger. And we also can see a lot of, physiological stuff, again, the hypervigilance, all of that. We can see apathy, like, well, why bother attitude, something called anhedonia. There's really no pleasure out of the stuff that once was joyful and pleasurable in life. And then we also see even things like poor self-care, not eating as well, not sleeping as well. That's what tends to happen to people in these relationships. Okay, it is depressing.
Yeah.
And so and what happens then is that the person in the relationship, in a way, is fading more and more and more. And they themselves wonder, like, maybe it is me because I'm the one who's sort of stopped taking care of myself and I'm kind of always a downer. But as they understand that the behavior in the relationship is unacceptable, and where it gets tricky is if the partner is very successful, they live in a beautiful home, they get to have lots of great experiences, they all the cars and the kids get to go to the fancy schools and all the stuff, right? There is a sense of almost guilt. Well, I've got all the bells and whistles. Maybe this is it. Like maybe I'm holding out for too much. And there can be a real sense of shame and self-blame of I'm still complaining and I have all this stuff. So there's also that, it's a guilt. And that's guilt is a very common reaction in survivors in these relationships. The challenge is though, and this is what makes narcissistic relationships such a unique space for the partners. A partner of somebody who's an addict, a partner of somebody living with a severe mental illness, a partner of somebody living with a dementia, a partner of someone living with a physical illness, there's a lot of empathy for that partner. We're like, wow, they're really having to walk a difficult path here of the ups and downs of their partner who's going through this hard thing. But the partner of someone who's narcissistic doesn't have that because by and large, the world sees the narcissistic partner as a titan, as a winner, amazing, as helpful, as generous. They paid for this one to go get this, and they did that, and they picked up the check, and they took everyone on a vacation, and they're charming, and they're charismatic, and they hold court at the table, and isn't this all grand? And so the partner, it's what I call sort of the dinner party effect. They're at the dinner party and everyone's laughing at their stories. And even the partner's like, okay, I was wrong. They're a good guy. And the minute the car door closes, it's criticism, it's anger. It's like, why did you make me look so bad? Did you really have to bring up that I worked with that other company once upon a time? Really? And the partner's thinking like, it's just, they didn't even think anything of it. So now the partner feels smaller and smaller and smaller. Over time, you'll see people in these narcissistic relationships really become silenced because they're afraid anything they say is going to get them into trouble. But the world is often seeing what seems like a really well put together person.
So how do you help guide them? Stay or go?
So the stay or go conversation, I tend to be agnostic to that. I say, I'm going to help you whether you stay or go, because staying or going, there's so many elements there. I mean, one of the most crucial is obviously the practical, finances, minor children, other logistical stuff. That's
cultural
one piece. Cultural is big.
Yeah.
Cultural is really big. It may not be permissible in a culture to get divorced, or you would lose a lot of social support or social status. You might lose
your family of origin.
You might lose your family of origin. You may not want to do the whole family court fandango. There's all of that. Then there are what we call the trauma bonded pieces. These are things, they feel real, but it's things like, I have hope that they can change. I don't want this next person they're going to meet to get this better version of them that I created, right? I'm like, no, it's just version 1.0 forever. So you really don't need to worry about this. So it's there's all these other fears that come. There's a fear of being alone, like some of the standard existential fears, old fears of abandonment that come up from the idea of a relationship ending. When we talk about more severe narcissism, where it's more malignant, exploitative, coercive, people are also afraid what would happen if they did leave. It's a phenomenon called post-separation abuse.
Meaning that
we could see stalking, smear campaigns, spreading of rumors, sharing of inappropriate information, sharing of confidences that shouldn't be broken, manipulating minor children, manipulating adult children, hassling people legally through family court. And if the narcissistic partners better resourced, they can really, really do a number on someone. So some people are also afraid of that. So they're they're not really staying as much as they're avoiding that horrific outcome.
But one of my friends, I'll just kind of do a parallel. He said, when we're talking about water, he's a nutrition specialist, and he says, look, either you have a filter or you are the filter. You know, so there's a corollary in how you described it. It's like you can stay, but you become a filter for some toxins.
It's more, so in other words, it's this, the staying is a slower burn in terms of healing. There's a concept.
Can you fully heal?
I mean, I guess it comes down to what do we mean by healing? You can, if you stay, can you flourish? I think you can in very circumscribed ways.
Yeah, it's a narrow path though, isn't it?
Because as I always tell people, if you stay, you can't share your good news with your narcissistic partner. You can't share your bad news with your narcissistic partner. So you kind of got to stick to the indifferent. You're talking about the weather. You're talking about the who won the Academy Award. You're talking about they're building a new restaurant in town. A lot of people say, well, that's not really a relationship. I'm like, no, it's all your relationship ever really was. Now we've just lifted the conflict out of it.
Talk about the DEEP model.
That is a model. It's just sort of quick acronym rubric for people to remember to not engage in these relationships, especially if they decide to stay or have ongoing contact. And the don't go deep means don't defend, don't engage, don't explain, and don't personalize. The mistake people make in narcissistic relationships is they engage as though the narcissistic person is listening with a whole mind, right? The narcissistic person is listening only in a way that's self-serving. So if you're defending yourself, they're going to gaslight. If you're explaining yourself, they're going to gaslight.
And explain gaslighting.
And gaslighting it's a form of emotional abuse where a person's reality, memory, perceptions, experiences are denied. And then the person is told that they are somehow lacking or there's something wrong with them. Gaslighting's not lying, right? So lying would be, I never said that. You never saw me there. I've never talked to her. That's lying, okay? Gaslighting is, I never said that, but you know what? You've become so paranoid since our second child was born. You've become so paranoid since Charlie was born. And I really got to wonder, like, maybe this is some of your cuckoo coming back. That's what makes it gaslighting.
No, I didn't. I thought that gaslighting also involved, what do you mean? Like you saw me holding hands with somebody. You didn't see me holding hands with somebody.
That's the first part. You got to have the second part.
You got to have the second part. Which is like, are you okay?
Are you okay? Like, what's up with you?
So it's not like a blatant lie.
You get weird around your period like this.
Yeah.
That's what makes it the gaslight.
Keep going. What are some other subtle forms of gaslighting? Because you can gaslight people and not be a narcissist.
You're too sensitive is a form of gaslighting, right? Because in saying that, what you're saying is there's something wrong with you. You misperceive situations, right? So we're talking and you have a reaction and I'm like, oh my God, you are just too sensitive. That's a gaslight.
Why are you so sensitive?
Why are you so sensitive?
Yeah. Boy, I can't say anything
I can't say anything. That's a gaslight.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So I think I kind of had the term a little misconstrued here. So
a lot of people do.
Yeah.
A lot of people do. Yeah.
Like I thought it was a manipulation of someone's truth.
No.
Manipulation.
It's a manipulation. It's a manipulation of truth, but also the doubling. In fact, Theo Dorpat, who was a psychiatrist who wrote about this a long time ago, he called it the double whammy. It's not just that manipulation of reality. It's then the further manipulation of reality by dissembling the other person. You're nuts.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. Man, psychology is complicated, isn't it? It's complicated,
but it's also quite simple.
In what ways?
Right? Like in a way, I hate to say it, but destroying a person's psyche is a pretty straightforward process. And narcissistic people have that wired.
Yeah, from that lens, yes. And the old adage, like you got to tear them down to build them up. And I think it's really easy to tear someone down, but really hard to build someone back up. And you got to be very, very skilled if you're going to adopt that model for coaching or whatever.
Yes, you do.
By the way, I think it's a terrible model.
I personally think, as a psychologist, I think it's a terrible model, especially trauma-informed.
Yeah.
I'm not a fan. I am definitely not a fan. And I don't think there's a single piece of trauma literature that, I think the way a trauma-informed model would be is that if someone is torn down, we can build them back up. but we should not intentionally set out to tear them down. If you think about Viktor Frankl, right? Viktor Frankl will be like, now kids, do not go out seeking suffering on your own. It will find you.
Yeah,
okay?
right. Yeah, right.
So don't go make a mess of your life to try to test this out.
Oh, God. We've referenced number of times in the conversation he, because there is a prevailing bit of research that there's more men with narcissism than women. Do you have a theory of why that is? I don't know why that is.
Yeah, so just let me put sort of the qualifier in there. There are different forms of narcissism. The big three are grandiose, vulnerable, and malignant narcissism, right? There's some other subtypes, but if we stick with the big three, grandiose narcissism is that arrogant, charming, charismatic, look at me, I'm so great, I'm the king of everything. That's the grandiose narcissist. The malignant narcissist is sort of that dark tetrad, the sort of the overlap of psychopathy, narcissism, sadism, and Machiavellianism.
Wild. Okay. And vulnerable narcissism.
So vulnerable narcissism, this is the money shot because we don't talk about this enough. And even the formulations on vulnerable narcissism, they've really only been discussed in earnest for about the past 20 years. Miller, Pincus, Ronningstam. These are the researchers in this space.
The most cunning of them all.
Cunning and not cunning. The vulnerable narcissists are who end up in our offices because the vulnerable narcissistic folks are more likely, they don't present with the charm and the charisma and the dazzle. They actually are more often to present as failure to launch, passive aggressive, victimized, aggrieved, and disenfranchised. And that's what makes them dangerous because they still have the entitlement, the selfishness, the dysregulation. This is every internet troll. This is a dangerous, I actually think in some ways the vulnerable narcissists are every bit as dangerous as the malignant narcissists. And since these subtypes can combine, malignant, vulnerable narcissists are the most dangerous people in the world. And I want to say one piece about gender and narcissism. Yeah. In all forms of narcissism, men more often than women, except vulnerable narcissism, and that's equal across genders. Vulnerable narcissism is equal men and women, but malignant and grandiose, I think girls are actually still to this day told to sort of dial it down a little bit in terms of, even like on the field, the kind of, if I can curse, the shit talking and stuff like that. Girls tend not to be socialized to do that as much, nor do girls tend to lean into behaviors like physical bullying and physical intimidation. That stuff is probably going to code more towards grandiose and malignant narcissism. Those are traits and qualities that are more tolerated in men. Whereas the vulnerable narcissism, that patterning is actually experienced in both men and women. And most clients I've worked with who've had narcissistic mothers, almost without exception, it's been a vulnerable narcissistic.
I wrote a white paper for a pro team that I was working with on how to, I didn't want to call it borderline or narcissism. I said how to handle difficult personalities. Mm-hmm. And it was like describing what they are and then ways to work with it. Oh my goodness, I could have used your insights in that. So there might be a consulting gig in here for the two of us to be able to do something fun there. Okay, why more men than women?
So it's I think a lot of it is socialization. I think a lot of it goes back to, it's a mistake we're still making. We still don't socialize emotional expression sufficiently in men and boys. We still pathologize the expression of vulnerable emotion in men and boys. That's got to go somewhere, right? And it can create that sense of shame. And if there's one, other than protecting all children from trauma, if we did that, we'd probably erase narcissism. But we're not doing that on my watch. I wish we could. I'd be out of a job. All of us would be out of a job. Yeah. But in the absence of that, creating many, many more experiences for boys, especially starting in middle school, to be more emotionally vulnerable. I think the little guys, they're able to do it. Like little boys can be emotionally vulnerable and available. You hit those hormones, and what we still have not figured out is how to bridge that gap into puberty, where sexuality and emotions and hormones and all of that are raging, and that we as a culture do not, I don't think any culture does it well, hold space for men and boys to be vulnerable without pathologizing them as weak. And without that vent, I do think that the grandiose and the malignant narcissism are more likely than to be expressed. The girls are allowed amongst peers with other adults to be able to express emotion. And I'm using a binary gender characterization because that's the research we've got.
Very cool. I want to introduce you to, very cool, very scary, very cool how clearly you are. Yeah. I want to introduce you to Scott Barry Kaufman's work, cognitive psychologist that just released a book on this. Good mind, good sound bit of research on victimhood.
Yep.
And he points to vulnerable narcissism as kind of the archetype of it. So look, I could go on and on. This is great.
Thank you. We have to do it again sometime.
Yeah, I really enjoyed all of this. So thank you for the clarity of thinking, the frameworks you're working from. And I loved your book. I love that you also dedicated it to your mom. If you had 1 to 3 books that you would hope people would read, what would they be?
It would be Trauma and Repair by Judith Herman. That's a given. I would say Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl and Existence by Rollo May.
Well done. Thank you. Thank you. Brilliant.
Thank you so much. It was so lovely. It's such a fascinating conversation. I really appreciated this opportunity.
Next time on Finding Mastery, we're joined by Sahil Bloom, investor, writer, and creator of the Curiosity Chronicle. In this high-energy conversation, Sahil shares the simple frameworks and mental models that helped him go from burnout and pressure to purpose and play. It's a fresh take on ambition, identity, and redefining success. Join us on Wednesday, August 6th, 9 a.m. Pacific for this insightful conversation.